Hello, everyone. I am the Cursed Speaker. I help you relax and fall asleep with stories and spoken words. Before we begin, like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are, and where are you watching from? Now, just listen and unwind. I found a list of rules for staying safe in the woods. I should have followed them. Eli's laughter echoed through the dense, ancient forest, a sound so out of place in the eerie silence that it seemed almost sacrilegious. The late autumn canopy, a riot of deep oranges and reds, filtered the sunlight into a perpetual twilight, casting long shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Alex trudged behind, his backpack heavy with the weight of their camping gear and the unspoken dread that had settled in his stomach the moment they stepped under the forest's watchful gaze. "Come on, Alex, it's just a bit further," Eli called back, his voice brimming with the thrill of adventure that always seemed to guide his actions, for better or worse. Alex wanted to believe that. They had been inseparable since childhood, two halves of a whole, with Eli's reckless curiosity perfectly balanced by Alex's cautious pragmatism. Yet, as they ventured deeper into the woods, known for its unexplained disappearances and the rich local folklore of spirits and creatures guarding its depths, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this time, Eli's penchant for adventure had led them into something they couldn't easily escape from. The forest seemed to close in around them, the silence so profound that even their footsteps seemed muffled, as if the very earth beneath their feet was urging them to turn back. But Eli pressed on, driven by a desire for one last adventure before college started, and their paths diverged into the unknown. They set up camp in a small clearing, the ground covered in a thick layer of fallen leaves that whispered secrets of ages past. As Eli busied himself with the tent, Alex gathered firewood, each snap of a twig sounding like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. It was then that Eli found the list. Nailed to a tree at the edge of their clearing was a piece of weathered paper, the handwriting elegant but hurried, as if written by someone under great distress. The rules for staying safe in the woods were listed one by one. Never follow the lights, ignore the whispers after dark, do not harm the crows, and so on. Eli's eyes sparkled with excitement as he read each rule aloud. "This is incredible. It's like something out of a story. We have to see if there's any truth to these." Alex felt a chill run down his spine, the words igniting an overwhelming sense of dread within him. "Eli, this isn't a game. They're warnings." But Eli was undeterred, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Come on, where's your sense of adventure? We'll be fine. We always are." As night fell, the forest transformed. The once vibrant canopy now seemed to smother the light from their campfire, casting their surroundings into an impenetrable darkness that seemed to swallow sound whole. The air grew cold, a mist rising from the ground that slithered between the trees like ghostly serpents. Eli was the first to hear the whispers. Soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from all directions at once, growing in intensity until they were almost deafening. Yet when he looked to Alex for confirmation, his friend heard nothing but the crackling of the fire and the pounding of his own heart. The whispers stopped as suddenly as they had begun, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. Eli, wide-eyed and pale, finally seemed to grasp the gravity of their situation. "We should have listened to the rules," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Alex nodded, his fear a tangible thing that seemed to constrict his chest. "We need to leave, now." But the forest had other plans. As they hurriedly packed their belongings, a soft, mesmerizing glow appeared between the trees, bobbing gently as if carried by an unseen hand. Eli, ever the adventurer, was drawn to it like a moth to a flame, despite Alex's desperate pleas to ignore it. They followed the light deeper into the forest, the trees growing denser with each step, until they could barely see the sky above. The light always seemed just out of reach, leading them on a path that twisted and turned, defying all sense of direction. It was only when the light vanished, leaving them in utter darkness, that they realized their mistake. They were hopelessly lost, the familiar landmarks of their camp nowhere to be seen. Panic set in, a primal fear of the dark and the unknown that gnawed at their resolve. They wandered aimlessly, calling out for help that would never come, the forest around them alive with sounds that had no source. Shadows moved just beyond the reach of their flashlights, shapes that seemed almost human, but twisted into grotesque parodies of life. When the crows came, their cries harsh and mocking, Eli remembered the rule he had so carelessly ignored. Do not harm the crows. But it was too late. The birds surrounded them, a swirling mass of feathers and beaks that pecked and clawed, their eyes gleaming with malevolent intelligence. In their desperation, Eli and Alex found themselves back at their camp, the fire long since extinguished, their tent a tattered ruin. The list of rules fluttered in the breeze, a silent testament to their folly. They spent the night huddled together, jumping at every sound, every whisper of wind that seemed to carry voices speaking in tongues long forgotten. When dawn finally broke, the forest was transformed once again, the terror of the night seeming almost like a bad dream in the light of day. But the scars remained, both physical and mental, a reminder of the night they had tempted fate and paid the price. As they made their way out of the forest, the once vibrant colors of autumn seemed dull and lifeless, a world drained of its wonder. Eli and Alex never spoke of what happened in the forest, the memories too painful to revisit. But the experience bound them together in a way that nothing else could, a shared ordeal that would haunt their dreams for years to come. The forest remained ancient and inscrutable, its secrets hidden beneath a canopy of leaves. To those who dared to venture into its depths, it offered a simple warning: respect its rules or suffer the consequences. Under the cloak of night, the forest surrounding Eli and Alex's campsite seemed to breathe, a living, pulsating entity with its own secrets and whispers. The two friends, bound by years of shared adventures and a love for the untamed wilderness, had ventured into these woods seeking solace from the clamor of their daily lives. Yet as the days unfolded, the serene escape they had envisioned slowly morphed into a tableau of unexplained phenomena and fraying nerves. It began subtly with whispers that danced on the edge of perception. At first, Eli dismissed it as the wind playing tricks, its breath weaving through the dense canopy of trees. But Alex couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of his stomach. The whispers seemed to call their names, a soft, sibilant hissing that grew more insistent with each passing night. They searched the surrounding darkness, flashlights piercing the blackness, only to find the forest staring back at them, silent and unyielding. Eli's curiosity was piqued. The whispers were a mystery to unravel, a story to delve into. Alex, however, saw them as a harbinger, a warning whispered by the forest itself. The divide between them grew, with Eli's fascination clashing against Alex's growing apprehension. One evening, as twilight bled into the night, a path of small, ethereal lights appeared, flickering like will-o'-the-wisps, leading deeper into the heart of the woods. Eli was mesmerized, the allure of the unknown pulling at his very soul. He felt a deep, inexplicable urge to follow, to discover where this luminous breadcrumb trail might lead. Alex, however, stood rooted to the spot, his voice a mixture of fear and frustration as he tried to dissuade Eli from venturing further. "Don't you see? This isn't natural, Eli. These lights, the whispers, it's like the forest is alive watching us," Alex argued, his voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to be overheard by the unseen forces surrounding them. Eli, however, was undeterred. "Or it's just phosphorescent fungi, or maybe fireflies. You're letting your imagination run wild," he countered, his tone light, trying to inject some rationality into the situation. But as they stood there, debating under the watchful gaze of the forest, the lights began to dim, retreating further into the woods, as if inviting them to follow or daring them to retreat. In the end, curiosity won over caution, and they followed the lights, with Eli leading the way and Alex reluctantly trailing behind. The path they tread was unfamiliar, twisting and turning, leading them deeper into the forest than they had ever ventured before. The lights guided them through the underbrush, past ancient trees that seemed to watch them with silent, knowing eyes. Eventually, the lights vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving them enveloped in darkness, the sense of being watched more oppressive than ever. In the days that followed, crows began to shadow their hikes. The birds, with their glossy black feathers and piercing eyes, seemed to follow them with an intelligence that was unsettling. They would perch silently on the branches above, their watchful gaze fixed on the two men as they passed beneath. The crow's presence added an eerie layer to the already tense atmosphere, their silent vigil a constant reminder that they were not alone. Alex's anxiety reached a fever pitch. the cumulative effect of the whispers, the mysterious lights, and the crows watching from above, making him feel as though they were trespassing in a realm that did not welcome them. He pleaded with Eli to leave, to abandon this place and its unsettling mysteries. "We're not wanted here, Eli. Can't you feel it? The forest, it's like it's alive, and it doesn't want us here," Alex said one evening, his voice tinged with desperation. Eli, however, was torn. His rational mind struggled to dismiss the events as mere coincidences, the product of overactive imaginations and perhaps isolation, yet a part of him couldn't deny the strange, almost supernatural quality of their experiences. The thrill of the unknown beckoned to him, a siren call he found hard to resist. Their arguments grew more frequent, the tension between them mirroring the oppressive atmosphere of the forest. The once strong bond of their friendship began to show signs of strain as fear and curiosity pulled them in opposite directions. One night, as they sat by the campfire, the air thick with unspoken words and the weight of their experiences, the whispers returned. This time they were louder, more insistent, as if emboldened by the discord between the friends. The forest around them seemed to close in, the darkness more suffocating than before. Eli stood up abruptly, his face a mask of determination. "I need to know," he said, his voice barely audible over the crackling of the fire. "Know what? That we're playing into some forest game? Eli, this isn't like any of our trips. This is wrong. All of it," Alex replied, his voice rising in frustration. But Eli was already moving towards the edge of the campsite, drawn once again by the whispers that seemed to call just to him. Alex watched, torn between his desire to leave and his loyalty to Eli. In the end, it was the latter that compelled him to follow, stepping into the darkness after his friend. As they ventured further into the night, the whispers grew louder, guiding them like a macabre chorus. The forest seemed alive with unseen watchers, the air charged with anticipation. The crows, silent sentinels of the night, followed from above, their black eyes reflecting the faint light of the moon. The tension between Eli and Alex simmered beneath the surface, a silent battle of wills and fears. The forest, with its whispers, lights, and watchful crows, had become a crucible, testing the limits of their friendship and courage. As they delved deeper into the heart of the forest, the true nature of their journey began to reveal itself, the line between reality and nightmare blurring. The forest, with its ancient secrets and whispered warnings, had ensnared them in its grip, leading them on a path from which there was no easy return. The subtle horror of their situation unfolded with each step, the realization that they were part of a story much older and darker than they could have imagined. The whispers, the lights, the crows, all were threads in a tapestry of fear and fascination that wrapped around them, pulling them deeper into its folds. In the end, the forest and its mysteries would test not just their resolve, but the very fabric of their friendship. Would curiosity lead to revelation, or would fear drive them apart? Only the forest knew. Its whispers a siren song that promised answers, while concealing its true intentions in the shadows. Under the cloak of night, the forest around Eli and their friends transformed. The once benign whispers of the wind through the trees now carried an ominous weight, a warning they had foolishly chosen to ignore. Ignore the whispers after dark, the rule had stated, a directive they had mocked in their arrogance. Now, as darkness enveloped their campsite, the true cost of their skepticism became terrifyingly clear. The first scream shattered the night's calm, a sound so chilling and unearthly it seemed to freeze the very air around them. It was followed by another, and then another, each scream more horrifying than the last, encircling the campsite like a noose. The source of these screams remained unseen, hidden within the shadowy embrace of the forest, yet their presence was as palpable as the fear that now gripped Eli's heart. Panicked and regretful, Eli turned to their friends, the firelight casting eerie shadows across their faces. "I made a mistake," Eli admitted, voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to provoke the unseen entities further. "We need to follow the rules strictly if we're going to survive until morning." Their friends nodded, eyes wide with fear. The earlier bravado vanished like smoke in the wind. They gathered closer to the campfire, as though its light could ward off the darkness that pressed in from all sides. But the light, they soon realized, was a feeble shield against the horrors that lurked just beyond its reach. Despite their newfound resolve to adhere to the rules, strange occurrences began to intensify around them. Objects they had meticulously placed and accounted for began to move of their own accord, disappearing only to reappear in impossible locations. Eli's backpack, left securely zipped and placed against a tree, was found hanging from a branch several feet above, swaying gently as if touched by an unseen hand. But it was the visions that truly tested their sanity. Shadowy figures, barely discernible, began to encroach upon the edges of their campsite. These apparitions moved with an eerie grace, their forms flickering in and out of existence, like flames in a draft. At times, they seemed to stare directly at Eli and their friends, eyes glowing with a malevolent light before vanishing into the night. The group huddled closer, voices reduced to whispers, as they recounted the rules they had so carelessly dismissed. With each strange occurrence, each chilling vision, the importance of these rules became painfully clear. They were not mere suggestions, but lifelines, in a place governed by forces beyond their understanding. As the night wore on, the boundary between their campfire's light and the encroaching darkness became a battleground. The unseen entities that had chased them with their screams now seemed content to toy with their fears, their presence a constant reminder of the grave mistake Eli had made. In a moment of desperation, Eli proposed a plan. "We need to do something proactive," they said, voice tinged with determination. "Let's try to communicate, show that we respect the rules now. Maybe then they'll leave us alone." The idea was met with skepticism, but the alternative, sitting passively as their sanity was eroded by fear, was far worse. Together they crafted a makeshift offering, a collection of items they hoped would appease whatever forces they had angered. With trembling hands, they placed it just beyond the circle of light, a symbol of their contrition. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual chorus of nocturnal sounds falling silent. Then, as if in response, a single soft whisper floated through the trees, words indiscernible but its tone unmistakably soothing. It was a small gesture, but to the beleaguered group it felt like a reprieve, a sign that their apology might have been accepted. Emboldened, they began to recite the rules aloud, a litany against the darkness. With each rule spoken, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to lighten, the shadowy figures retreating into the night until they were no more than a bad memory. As dawn approached, the forest transformed once again. The sinister presence that had dominated the night receded, leaving behind only the natural sounds of the wilderness waking to a new day. The sun's first rays pierced the darkness, casting light on a group of friends huddled together, exhausted but alive. They had survived the night, but the experience had changed them. The rules they had once scoffed at were now etched into their minds, a testament to the night when the veil between their world and another had been perilously thin. As they packed their belongings, preparing to leave the place that had tested them in ways they could never have imagined, Eli looked back at the forest. It was beautiful and serene in the light of day, but they knew better now. The forest had secrets, and its rules were not to be taken lightly. With one last look at the campsite, now just a clearing with the remnants of a fire pit, they turned away. The journey back to civilization was silent, each lost in their own thoughts, processing the events of the night. The experience had bonded them in a way few others could understand. They had faced the unknown, the unimaginable, and had emerged not unscathed but stronger. The memories of that night would linger, a haunting reminder of the fragility of their understanding of the world. But for now, they were content to leave the forest and its mysteries behind, stepping back into a world that seemed, by comparison, blissfully mundane. The sun shone brightly overhead, casting their shadows behind them as they walked away, a symbol of the darkness they had escaped but would never forget. Under the cloak of a moonless night, the dense forest whispered secrets as old as time, its shadows dancing like specters in the faint glow of their lanterns. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, clung to their skin as they pressed forward, the path beneath their feet little more than a narrow, winding scar in the wilderness. They had been warned about the forest, told of its insatiable hunger for those foolish enough to stray from the path. Yet desperation had driven them to ignore such cautions, their goal seemingly within grasp, but always just beyond reach. The forest seemed to breathe around them, each exhalation rustling through the trees with a predatory anticipation. It was as if the very ground they tread upon was alive, aware, and amused by their plight. The rules had been simple: stay on the path, avoid the woods at night, and never, under any circumstances, listen to the voices that beckoned from the shadows. But fear, that most primal of instincts, had taken root within their hearts, whispering of unseen horrors lurking just beyond the reach of their light. In a moment of sheer panic, driven by the bone-chilling howls that seemed to encircle them, they made a fateful decision. With a collective breath that tasted of dread, they stepped off the path, the underbrush closing behind them like the jaws of a great beast. The forest floor beneath their feet shifted and changed, the familiar becoming alien, as if the very landscape sought to disorient and consume them. The further they ventured, the more the forest seemed to warp around them. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches clawing at the sky in silent agony. The air grew colder, the darkness deeper, as if the night itself was alive, feeding off their fear. Whispers filled their ears, voices that were not quite human, promising salvation and delivering only despair. They realized too late the folly of their choice, the path lost to them now, swallowed by the voracious appetite of the forest. It was in this realm of shadows and fear that they encountered him, a figure so out of place in the wilderness that for a moment they doubted the evidence of their own eyes. An old hermit, his back bent from the weight of years, stood before them, his eyes gleaming with a light that spoke of knowledge both profound and terrifying. The forest around them hushed as if even the trees dared not interrupt. "Lost souls," he began, his voice a whisper that cut through the silence. "You have broken the rules set forth to protect you from this place. The path was your salvation, yet you chose the way of peril." They gathered around him, a motley group bound by fear, seeking answers, seeking hope. The hermit looked at each of them, his gaze piercing through to their very souls. "This forest," he continued, "is ancient, alive, and hungry. It feeds on fear, grows stronger with each act of disobedience. The rules were not meant to confine you, but to save you from the true nature of this place. I set them long ago, when I first discovered the forest's thirst for the chaos that lies in the hearts of men. The revelation struck them with the force of a physical blow. The rules, the path, their very purpose in this place, all had been a shield against the darkness that now sought to claim them. The hermit, seeing the dawning comprehension in their eyes, offered a grim sort of solace. "There is a way to survive," he said, his voice barely above a murmur, "but it requires more courage than simply facing the darkness. You must confront the very essence of your fear, feed the forest a lie so convincing that it sates its hunger without consuming you. The idea of deceiving an entity as vast and ancient as the forest itself seemed impossible, yet what choice did they have? To wander aimlessly, lost until madness or death claimed them, was no choice at all." They nodded. A silent pact formed in the heart of darkness, their resolve hardened by the hermit's words. He guided them then through a landscape that twisted and writhed under their feet, always just on the brink of unrecognizable. They moved not as prey, but as specters themselves, part of the night, their fear cloaked in a veneer of defiance. The forest sensed their change, its whispers growing urgent, angry, as if it could not comprehend this game they played. Finally, they reached a clearing, the sky above a tapestry of stars, untouched by the corruption of the forest. The hermit stopped, turning to face them once more. "This is where we part," he said, his voice tinged with a sorrow that spoke of countless others he had guided to this point, knowing not all had survived. "Remember, the forest is a creature of deception. It mirrors your fears, your doubts. Feed it confidence, even if such confidence is naught but a facade." With those final words, he stepped back, fading into the forest as if he had never been more than a shadow. They stood together, a small island of defiance in a sea of darkness, their hearts beating a frantic rhythm of hope and terror. The night grew silent, the forest holding its breath as they stepped forward, their every sense alert. They knew the path home lay somewhere ahead, through the ever-changing landscape that sought to devour them. But armed with the hermit's wisdom, they understood now that the forest, for all its ancient power, could be fooled, could be bested. As they walked, the forest around them seethed with rage, its illusions growing more desperate, more terrifying, yet with each step they shed their fear, leaving it behind like a discarded cloak. They walked not as victims, but as survivors, their resolve a beacon that cut through the darkness. The forest's fury was a tempest, a cacophony of voices and visions that sought to turn them back, to break them. But they held fast, their belief in the hermit's words stronger than the ancient malice that sought to claim them. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the assault ceased. The forest, recognizing at last that it could not consume them, receded, its shadows drawing back as if in defeat. Ahead, bathed in the first light of dawn, lay the path, their salvation a mere whisper of grass and stone, yet as welcome as the embrace of a loved one. They stepped onto the path with a sense of awe, the horrors of the night fading like a bad dream in the morning sun. The forest around them was still, its malevolence replaced by a grudging respect. They had faced the darkness, confronted their fears, and emerged victorious. As they walked back into the world of light and life, they knew they were changed, marked by their journey through the heart of darkness. But they carried with them a new understanding, a knowledge that sometimes the greatest courage lay not in facing the monster, but in facing oneself. The woods had never been silent, but as dawn approached, a suffocating stillness enveloped the trees. Alex stumbled through the underbrush, his breath ragged, the taste of iron heavy on his tongue. The first light of dawn cast long shadows, turning the forest into a maze of dark and light, where shapes seemed to move just beyond the corner of his eye. Blood, his or Eli's, he couldn't tell, soaked through the fabric of his shirt, sticking to his skin uncomfortably. His mind raced, replaying the events of the night, but every time he tried to grasp a memory, it slipped away like smoke through his fingers. They had found the hermit's cabin just as the sun began to set, the light filtering through the trees in golden beams that seemed almost otherworldly. The hermit, a figure shrouded in shadows, had spoken in riddles, his voice a whisper that seemed to echo from the trees themselves. "Follow the rules, and you may survive the night," he had said, handing them a list that seemed to be written in blood. But before they could ask any questions, he had vanished, leaving them alone as darkness began to swallow the woods. The list of rules had been bizarre, instructions that made no sense yet filled them with an inexplicable dread. "Do not listen to the voices," one rule had warned. "Stay away from the shadows," another commanded. They had laughed it off at first, a joke to lighten the mood, but as the night progressed, the laughter died in their throats. The woods came alive with whispers, voices that called out in the darkness, promising safety, promising escape. Shadows moved with a life of their own, stretching and twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed almost human. They had tried to stay together to follow the rules, but the forest had other plans. It separated them, the trees shifting, paths disappearing as if they had never been. Alex had found himself alone, the whispers growing louder, the shadows reaching for him with cold, dark fingers. Panic had set in, a primal fear that clawed at his mind, urging him to run, to escape the suffocating darkness. And then there was silence, a silence so profound it felt like a scream. Alex had found his way back to their campsite as the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. But Eli was nowhere to be found. The list of rules had vanished, leaving no trace it had ever existed. The woods seemed to watch him, a silent witness to the night's horrors. Now, as he emerged from the woods, the early morning light revealed the extent of his ordeal. His clothes were torn, his body covered in cuts and bruises, a stark contrast to the serene beauty of the dawn. The small town lay ahead, its houses bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun, a stark reminder of a normalcy that felt like a distant memory. He didn't know how he had survived when Eli had not. The memories were fragmented, flashes of terror that made no sense. Had he seen Eli fall, or had it been one of the shadows, its form too horrifying to comprehend? The whispers had promised safety, but at what cost? Alex couldn't remember, the memories slipping away as if they were never his to keep. The townspeople found him at the edge of the woods, a figure out of a nightmare, his eyes wide with an unspeakable horror. They asked questions, their voices a distant echo in his mind. Where was Eli? What had happened in the woods? But Alex remained silent, the words trapped behind a wall of fear. The truth, whatever it was, lay buried in the woods, hidden beneath the shadows and whispers. As the days passed, the search for Eli continued, but the woods offered no clues, no trace of the night's events. The hermit's cabin remained elusive, disappearing into the folklore of the town as if it had never been. Alex watched from a distance, a ghost among the living, his mind a prison of fragmented memories and unanswerable questions. The woods had changed him, marked him in ways he couldn't understand. At night he would wake to the sound of whispers, the shadows in his room moving with a life of their own. The list of rules, though gone, remained etched in his mind, a reminder of the night he could never forget. He knew he could never return to the woods, yet a part of him remained there, lost among the trees. As the story of that night faded into whispers, a legend the townspeople would speak of in hushed tones, Alex tried to rebuild his life, but the shadows never left him and the whispers never ceased. The woods held a secret, a truth that Alex had touched but could never fully grasp. Eli was gone, swallowed by the darkness, and Alex, though he had emerged from the woods, would never truly escape. The dawn had broken, a new day beginning, but for Alex the night would never truly end. The woods had claimed something from him, a part of his soul he would never get back. He lived in the shadow of that night, a survivor who had lost more than he had ever known. The list of rules had disappeared, but its legacy remained, a haunting reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows, waiting for the night to fall.